right. Well, guys, I think it is actually just about right at time here. So we're going to go ahead and get started on time tonight. And we'll finish this thing up on time in about 3.5 hours, hopefully. So, no, just kidding. We'll hopefully have this done relatively quickly. But tonight's class is really a big topic, and it's really one of the ones that I probably get the most questions about when we start, especially living here in Kansas. You know, allergies are kind of a big deal around here, right? And so tonight we're going to cover a lot of information. We're going to cover some of it in real depth, and some really good information we're going to end up flying by. So in tonight's class, you're really going to kind of have to pay attention to what we're talking about and what's going on the slides, because at some point I may say something that's really important, but the trouble is I never know when I'm going to say that, right? So I can't tell you necessarily when to clue in. So most of you guys have probably been to some of my workshops. That's why you're watching this tonight. But there's also a number of new people that are going to be joining us, and I always like to kind of go over a couple of the ground rules during these workshops. One of the ground rules, and probably the biggest one, is that you're going to get out of the class whatever you put into it, right? I've sat through millions of hours of education at this point, probably. And one of the things that, whether I've been teaching a class or I've been sitting in a class, one of the things that I've kind of noticed is that those that are engaged, they tend to get the most out of it, right? I've went to seminars where I'm thinking, man, I'm going to get a ton out of this seminar, and guess what? I got a ton out of it. There's other times I've sat in a class, I'm like, I'm going to get nothing out of this workshop, and guess how much I got out of it? Nothing, right? And so what I really want to challenge you guys with, as if you're going to put in the time to actually, listen to and watch this presentation, is that you actually engage in the information. You really dig into it, and you ask yourself, how do you feel about that information? Is that information accurate in your life? Is there some things that you could start implementing, or some new understandings, or some new concepts that maybe you could apply to your life at this point? And so I really want you to leave your brains on, right? We're so used to sitting down and turning on the TV or looking at our cell phones and basically trying to disengage from the world or disengage from the information. And that's not what tonight is. I'm really not that entertaining, so tonight is more about information than entertainment, right? And so I really, like I said, you just really need to leave your brains on if you really want to get the most from this information. Now, sometimes ask why I do these classes, right? Why bother? Why do I do them? Well, there's a number of reasons, and none of them involve hearing my voice later. But the biggest reason I do these classes is my heart breaks because we are in a health crisis in this country. And we're in a crisis a lot of times because people simply don't know the information, right? It's a lot of the information is relatively simple to apply and to understand, but they've just never really been taught this information, and they've been living these under these false beliefs and these false premises, and it's really set our country as a society up for failure. One of the statistics that just recently came out this past year is that it really looked at the 11 most industrialized nations in the world, the richest countries in the world, the top 11. And the United States ranked number 11, and it ranked number 11 in health statistics by almost twice as bad as the next closest country to us, at number 10, and then there's this big jump to number 11, which is us, right? And the trouble is it's not only that we're the worst when it comes to health statistics generally, we also spend the most in our society on healthcare. So we're spending the most, and we're getting the worst outcomes. And that's really very, very, very obviously very unacceptable. And again, that's why I do these workshops, because I really think that our health crisis comes down to 3 primary problems. And the first one, I'm talking to the choir here. This is not your guys' problem. You're the ones listening to this workshop trying to learn new strategies and get better understanding. But the first big challenge I see to this health crisis that we have is personal responsibility, right? We have this tendency in our society to want to blame our genetics, or to blame our parents, or blame bad luck, or blame bad medicine, or blame the insurance, or blame bad germs. All these different things without actually asking ourselves what we can do. What's our responsibility, or what role could we possibly play in this? The second reason, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on this in this workshop, not directly but indirectly, I think you're going to understand that, we have a very poor definition of health in our society. And like I said, we're going to spend time on that later. And then the last one, the third reason that I think we're in a health crisis in our society, is something that I'll get to a little bit later. But if you've listened to any other workshops and you can remember that third one, it's actually kind of a funny joke. So in 3 hours, when I get done with the workshop and I circle back around to number 3, you might actually giggle a little. So this topic, this time of the year, as we start to move into spring, we had a little bit of an allergy flare-up last week with patients. Patients were coming in with some allergy issues, but we really haven't hit the full-on allergy season. And I wanted to do this workshop before we hit it, because that's actually the best time to deal with allergies, is before the allergies start. And so as we kind of buckle in, even if you're not suffering with allergies yet at this point, or maybe you never have, there might be somebody else in your family that has, or you just want to gain a better understanding of immune system and how the body works, you're going to get something from this. So tonight I kind of broke this class down into 3 sections. We're going to talk about what are allergies, why do people suffer with allergies, and what do we do about allergies, right? And so, one of the big things with these classes is we call it our body signals program, right? We believe that the body is talking to us. It tells us things. And our job is to be able to interpret what the body's saying, but also how to respond to it. There's thousands of people living with runny nose, red eyes, itchy eyes, congestion, breathing issues. And we refer to these things when we're talking about allergies, but these are really just body signals, because we know that the body is intelligent, and it's always making the best decision it can with the information that it's given. That's one of the premises that I work from, is that the body is smart. The body is not stupid. It does not make mistakes. It does the best that it possibly can. And the body wants to be healthy. That's what the body is striving for. Our body is smart and is trying to tell us when we're moving away from health or we're moving towards sickness. And symptoms sometimes are a warning sign or an alarm system. It's the communication that our body gives to our consciousness, and what it's doing is it's saying you need to make a choice. Change a habit, change your diet, change your sleep pattern, put that down, it's hot, or don't eat that, it's poison, right? Those are all signals from our body to tell us that we need to do something different. Now, sometimes the body will whisper, and it's just a low little quiet talk. Other times it's going to scream at you to get your attention. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying with that. Some symptoms are mild, some are more severe, right? These are, when we talk about this list of the common symptoms of the immune system going haywire, one of the things that I want patients to understand and people to understand is that allergies, and we're going to talk more about this as we go, but allergies, we've really just kind of come through this COVID season, right? We're starting to come out the other end of it. Thank goodness. It's been a long couple of years, right? Well, the whole thing with COVID was, how do we get the immune system primed up and ready for an invasion, right? And if you go back, and I did a whole webinar series over several weeks on the immune system and homeostasis of the immune system and why we may not want to get it revved up too much. And one of the reasons is actually allergies. The allergies are an immune response, and an appropriate immune response, but to the wrong thing, right? And like I said, we're going to talk about what causes that haywire to occur, why the immune system goes haywire, and why we get these downstream symptoms. Now, one of the things in our society, like I said, is we have this poor definition of health. So when we get these symptoms, is runny noses, the red eyes, the itchy, congestion, all of those things, what are we usually told to do? We're usually told to take drugs, avoid the triggers, or, worse, it runs in your family, right? So suck it up. This is how it's going to be. So you push on and you push on and you cover up the symptoms with drugs and you try to avoid the triggers. Eventually you don't go outside, you don't go near your pets, you don't eat that food, you don't exert yourself, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that there is a better way, and there's a different way. And that's what we're going to, like I said, really spend a lot of our time on. So thousands of people are living with these body signals that we kind of recognize as, allergies or hay fever, rhinitis or asthma or eczema, that runny nose, the red itchy eyes, the congestion, breathing issues, kind of sounds like Kansas in the spring and fall, right? One of the things that I really hope that you've already caught on to, and one of the keys, is that this is the body talking to us. It's just, are we listening to it, or are we simply trying to tell it to shut up? Like I said, our body is smart. It does the best it can with what it's been given, and health is normal. It's natural. The body is striving for health. So one of the things I want to put to bed right up front is this idea of allergies being genetic. Now, there is a certain genetic component to it. I'm not going to deny that at all. However, when we look at the statistics for allergies, one of the things I want you to notice is what happens around 1960. We had this low-level amount of allergy-specific IgE reactions, which is a true allergy, not necessarily a sensitivity. There is a difference between those two. An allergy typically is an IgE reaction, whereas a sensitivity is an IgG reaction. Allergies are usually more immediate. Their symptoms are more in your face, right? Like sinus pressure or runny nose, those kinds of things. But no, I mean, they're usually just more intense than sensitivities. Other allergic things like rhinitis, runny nose is what that means. Eczema or atopic dermatitis is another form of an allergy. And then, of course, asthma. But what I want you to notice is what happens around 1960. These numbers just start skyrocketing way up. And so my question to you is, do you think that our genetic makeup drastically changed in 1960? Is that, why we're seeing this progressive spike with these things? And obviously the answer to that is no. As a whole, as a human species, our genetics did not drastically change in 1960. We still are carrying the same genes that we've been carrying for years. So yes, there is a genetic component to it. I'm not going to deny that. But I think to blame all these allergies and all this eczema and all of these asthma issues on our genetics is kind of a scapegoat, right? And so now before we dive in further, so I wanted to put that one to bed right up front. But before we dive into the immune system and why allergies are increasing, I think it's really important that we kind of get a little bit more understanding of, how the immune system actually works. What's its purpose and how does it develop? The immune system I kind of think of like our defense system. It's our body's defense against infection and invaders. And I kind of think of it like the armed forces. Now, one of the things I want to point out, and we're not going to dive a lot into it tonight, but what I want you to remember is whenever you hear the word immune activation, I want you to think inflammation. Inflammation is actually an immune response, right? So inflammation is immune activation. Immune activation is inflammation, or a part of inflammation, right? So just like the armed forces, though, there's a lot of different facets to it. There's a lot of different dynamics. So there's an intelligence part to it, kind of think of like the national intelligence or the FBI or the CIA, etc. And then there's the armed forces, which can respond, which are made up of like the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, and all the specialists and, that are trained for various special ops, right? The immune system has all these little components and different weapons that it can use in different situations, all dependent on what that particular situation is. And so the immune system is really designed to attack an organism or a substance that could threaten or harm the body. It's a network of specialized cells and tissues and organs that work together to protect the body against invaders. Organs like the tonsils and the thymus glands that work in coordinated manner with the nervous system, right? And the endocrine system and the immune system, all to monitor the body and defend you against these germs and substances that may harm the body, as well as playing a critical role in tissue repair. You know, when I graduated, and it's been a while at this point, you know, the idea of this psychoneural immunology, this was a whole brand new field that was really exciting at the time, because we were just starting to understand how the dynamics of the immune system and the nervous system and our psychology all started to play a role together, and how they all started to interact. Now, before that time, it was kind of considered crazy talk to suggest that our emotions had an impact on our immune system, which, you know, nowadays we all kind of accept this as truth, right? But it wasn't that long ago. Yes, it's been over a decade that I graduated, but that wasn't that long ago. It kind of goes to show you how little we still probably know about the immune system, right? You know, if we haven't learned anything during, you know, the last couple of years with the COVID outbreaks, is that the immune system is complicated, and there's a lot going on with it, and we are still just such early understanders of our own human physiology in a lot of ways. But the principles that I'm going to teach you, I've stood the test of time. This is, you know, we're going to talk some cutting edge information, but a lot of it is fundamentals. Now, when this incredibly complex system of the immune system, and it's very sophisticated and very dynamic, but when it's working optimally, our body stays healthy, right? But we're under this constant attack from potentially harmful bacteria and viruses and even cancers. But the immune system is constantly at work, and it's always in a state of surveillance and defense. You know, one of the things that I go over in some of my other classes is that, you know, we tend to think that we're only under attack occasionally. That's not the case. In fact, it's kind of like the idea that, you know, we get strep throat, right? Well, the truth of the matter is we actually, you know, if we swabbed people's throat right now, about a third of the population would test positive for strep. Now, a third of the population isn't experiencing strep symptoms, right? And that's because their immune system is well regulated. It's taking care of it. It's keeping it minimized. It's keeping it at bay. But you know what? You try to go a week without sleeping and eating junk food and doing all kinds of that good stuff, there's a good chance you're going to catch strep, right? Now, the question is, did you catch strep? No, you already had the strep. Your immune system just got so weak that it was able to rear its ugly head, right? And so anyway, we have this constant surveillance and this constant defense. And as these potential threats and invaders are just a constant part of our life, it's ever present. The immune system keeps harm at bay and is defending us 24/7 when it's working properly. The immune system is central to our body's health maintenance and healing system. And this phenomenon of being in check all the time is what we call homeostasis. And there'll be a quiz at the end of this, and that's one of the fancy words for what health is. It's just homeostasis. It's balance within the body. This is just one remarkable example of how the innate intelligence in the body is constantly working. So when the body is exposed to a foreign substance or a foreign particle that poses a threat to the body, it's detected by one of these highly specialized cells, and the production of a number of different chemicals are released that promote the defense mechanism, like inflammation, which, you know, causes heat or fever, and we're talking about global immune activation, or mucus production. And often these reactions manifest as some type of bothersome symptom to us, right? And we associate this with getting sick or have an allergic reaction, right? So I want you to think for just a second. I always kind of take this to the extreme, right? Just to kind of help everybody understand. But I want you to imagine yourself going out to a fancy restaurant and ordering a nice meal, but it being poisoned or overgrown with toxins or bacteria in it. And a few minutes after you eat it, you find yourself in the bathroom vomiting. My question to you is, are you sick or are you healthy, right? Now, many would say sick because you're in the bathroom vomiting. That's one of our definitions of sickness. I would argue with you that that's actually health. Your body is doing exactly what your body should be doing in that situation. Now, vomiting is never pleasant, right? It's not something we enjoy doing, but it's also a very healthy response to being exposed to that toxin. Just like running a fever or producing mucus is a healthy response to try to clear those toxins from our body. In a normal, healthy body, these symptoms or body signals can actually, like I said, be a healthy situation, right? The intelligent response by the body and how we react to it is the critical component to ridding the body of this threat and being able to restore health. As uncomfortable as these symptoms may be, this discomfort has fueled the creation of this multi-trillion-dollar pharmaceutical industry and this pervasive drug culture that has been trained to seek the symptom suppression over overall health restoration. Now, of course, this comes at a price greater than money. And we're going to talk more about that later, but this is beginning to unravel that idea that we have this poor definition of health, right? Hopefully you guys are catching that nuance to it. But there is times where the body does malfunction, or what we think of as a malfunction. Again, the body does the best it can with the environment that we've created for it. But the immune system can break down and become unresponsive at times. So at one end of the extreme is when it's not responsive at all, right? And we call this immunosuppression. It's when the body is downregulated. The immune system can't react to a pathogen or a virus or a bacteria. And, obviously that can lead to very serious and deadly outcomes, right? If you can't rev up an immune response and you caught COVID, it can get you before you have a chance to get in front of it, right? Now, the other side of the equation is when the immune system can be overly reactive, and that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about allergies. And this leads to the common symptoms and conditions that people struggle with. These body signals, these seasonal allergies, hay fever, food allergies, pet allergies, bronchial asthma, inflammatory skin conditions like eczema. These inflammatory conditions, broadly known as atopic disorders, result from an oversensitivity of the immune system, and specifically with these, what we're talking about is an IgE-mediated reaction. These powerful immune modulators, IgE immunoglobulins, regulate our inflammatory response in the body, but when it goes sideways, it creates a state of hypersensitivity, or being hyperallergic, if you will. This primed and overreact to the stimulation that the immune system gives is an allergy. And armed with this, we can start to focus on addressing the cause as opposed to trying to understand how we treat each one of these symptoms, right? Because they're a similar mechanism underlying the surface, so we can address that without having to fish apart what IgE is reacting, what's going on with each specific thing, as opposed to just, like I said, treating each symptom with some type of drug, or spending our lives in fear, or missing out on life because we're trying to avoid the next allergy or asthma trigger. The key to correcting these problems is really understanding how the immune system developed and where these problems kind of start from, and then we're going to get to what to do about them here in a second. So, I said that being healthy is normal. Being sick, by inverse definition, being sick is actually abnormal. Yeah, it's normal to be healthy, and we're designed to be healthy. Our body is actually hardwired to heal and survive. And your immune system is a very critical part of this design and objective. Software like when you're born with this incredible operating system, the intelligence inside you has been passed down for hundreds of generations of successful humans, because they lived to reproduce, right? So they were pretty good at it. And so you got to be really good at it as well. It's just really, truly kind of remarkable to kind of think about the fact that you were born with such an incredible inheritance before you were even born, right? But we were also designed to require some exposure. we were designed to face some challenges in our environment to help train and develop our immune system. So if I go back to our armed forces analogy for a second, when a new recruit joins the Army, they go to a boot camp, basically for basic fitness training, and then they go on to learn some hand-to-hand combat, and then maybe some knife fighting. Eventually they move up to rifles and guns, and eventually maybe even explosives, right? There's a progression. Each level of challenge creates a new skill and makes the soldier more effective and more powerful, right? Well, the same can be said with our internal armed forces, your immune system. It must be challenged naturally to fully mature and to develop. And there are a few critical steps along the way that we are designed to experience this naturally. One of the first ones is simply being born. We're designed to be born vaginally, right? We get the struggle from labor to stimulate the immune system. As we pass through the birth canal, we get the mother's natural flora, which to me is very fascinating. It actually changes about a week before delivery to make sure that that flora that the baby is receiving is what the baby needs during delivery. And then we move on to progress on to like breastfeeding and being around siblings and expanding our environment and putting things in our mouth, right? Maybe eating some dirt or teething. And then we move into childhood illnesses and getting fevers and how the body learns how to train and respond to some of those infections. These challenges are what actually trains our immune system, right? But we've kind of gotten to this idea that, that these things are bad, right? And we tend to try to want to avoid that, right? Like, don't put that in your mouth. We have the 5-second rule, right? Well, you've probably heard me say in other classes that we're not just under more stress nowadays, but we're under more unnatural stress. It's not the stress that we were necessarily designed to be under. We've for a lot of reasons, and none of these are like necessarily bad in and of their own right? But there's a reason that we're seeing this spike in allergies, and I'm kind of circling back to that. There's a time and place for each one of these things, so don't get me wrong about that. But when we look back and start asking what started to happen around 1960 that led to some of this big spike, well, it's because we started messing up our immune regulation that should have been developed during those early years. We started seeing more C-sections. We started seeing more formula fed. We started seeing more medication for younger kids than what we'd ever seen previously. We started seeing an increase in vaccination. So we started getting this unnatural exposure as opposed to the natural exposure. And then we really started to move into this clean freak, mentality, right? We started wiping everything down with Lysol and not letting kids play in the dirt and things like that. And this type of developmental interference trades our natural short-term acute childhood illnesses for these chronic lifelong conditions like asthma and allergies. And like I said, the rates of both have tracked up significantly, matching, like I said, the increase in antibiotic use and vaccination schedules. And all this is kind of what has set the stage for allergies, an undeveloped immune system. Like I said, that's why we started to see this. So it's not that our genetics changed, it's that we started to radically change our normal natural environment, and we started to create these newer stressors that our bodies were not developed for, right? And so when the untrained immune system faces the world, there are many insults, and it starts to trigger an immune system response. And usually these harmless environmental pathogens, like pet dander or whatever, the immune system lacks the training necessary to understand what's a threat and what's not a threat, and it tends to overreact to some of these non-threat allergens. And so we end up with these allergies. So what do we do about it, right? Unfortunately, we can't go back in time. We can't change what led to this problem. Maybe we can make different choices moving forward for future generations. But, what do we do now if we're somebody suffering with allergies? How do we deal with it at this point? And that's what I want to spend the rest of this class kind of talking about. there's always some things that as we learn new things and we start to understand that we do have some control over this, there's some things that we need to stop doing, some things that, maybe we need to slow down from doing, and there's some things that we probably just need to start doing. And so, for those of you at home taking notes, this is probably going to be your power slide. So, I told you at the beginning of the class I didn't know when I was going to say something interesting. Maybe I never will during this whole class, but I hope you get something from it. But here is kind of the one big takeaway here, I guess, if you will, for those of you that are, what's the main points? This is, it's not, I'm not a very good pastor or preacher because I have more than 3 points, right? But this is the doctor's baker's dozen. We have 13 points in this class. So what are my suggestions if you have allergies? Well, one of my first things is, start to eat healthy foods. Get those antioxidants. That's one of the ways that we start to re-regulate the immune system, get it back in check. We live in this free radical world. We live in this stress environment. We live in these things and we use up a lot of our antioxidants and we just don't eat healthy. We eat a lot of empty calories or junk calories, right? We eat way too much sugar. Sugar is like jet fuel for immune reaction. So, when we have just a little scratch or something like that, when we have a lot of sugar, instead of it just being a little bitty fire, it can turn into this raging explosion, right? And that's basically what an allergy is, right? It's the immune system that is just revved up and gone way too far. So one of my first recommendations, obviously, is, let's try to deal with that. Let's get some of the jet fuel out of the system. Let's throw some antioxidants into our diet. Let's eat those colorful foods. The more color they have, the more antioxidants. That's the easy way to kind of do it. We need appropriate hydration. We are way dehydrated as a society in general, partly because we're overly inflamed, right? So we have all these toxins that we're dealing with, not only that we're producing, but we're also exposed to lots of them in our environment. And so we need to filter those things out. Well, when you're dehydrated, you can't do that. The other thing that tends to happen is when we become dehydrated, it opens our mucous membranes and gives a place for viruses and bacteria and allergens to get a foothold on us, to get into our system, and for our body to perceive us as being invaded. So we want to hydrate. It also helps us keep that mucus a little bit thinner, right? So that it doesn't become thick and stagnant and end up with a sinus infection over top of an allergy issue, right? Sinus infections, one of the kind of ways to think about it is if we have, mucus that's moving and those sinuses are moving, it's like a flowing river. It's not a great environment for bacteria to get a big foothold. But you take a stagnant river or a stagnant pond, and before long, it's ripe with bacteria. Well, that's kind of the same thing with our sinuses, right? We want to keep those things moving. We want appropriate physical activity. Our immune system primarily lives within the lymphatic system. So most people know about arteries and veins. The other vascular system is the lymphatic system, and it really only works with physical activity. Our muscles is what pumps the lymphatic system. So we need appropriate physical activity. Now, if you're not sleeping, you're not eating well, you probably don't want to go run a marathon, right? That would become distress. But if you're doing the right amount of activity for what your health status is, it's called good stress or eustress, right? So there's another $5 word today. We want to take care of our mental and emotional health, right? We're under a lot of stress nowadays. We have limited time and, never enough money, at the end of the month and all of those things. So there's always this constant mental stress. That actually raises cortisol, which ultimately lowers our immune response, makes us gain weight, and promotes inflammation. So, take care of those mental, emotional situations. Have some of that recharge and downtime. Sleep is so important. And these are in no particular order, right? Like all of these things are so important. But sleep, obviously, is right up there at the top of the list. If you're ever, just trying to figure out how to get sick, start cutting your sleep schedule down by an hour a night until you get sick. It won't take you long to figure out that that's part of it. You got to take care of your nervous system. Everything happens through your nervous system. If it's dysregulated, you got no chance of anything else in the body being well regulated, right? That's what I do as a chiropractor, right? I adjust people. I try to get interference away from the nervous system so that the body can work the way that it's designed. Some people wonder, why is a chiropractor talking about allergies? Well, partly because we can do something about it, right? But partly it's just part of being healthy with it. I do recommend a probiotic for most people. We just don't eat enough fermented foods in our society. Now, if you do, great. You probably don't need a probiotic, but most people don't. Vitamin D. We live in Kansas, especially this time of year. Most people's vitamin D levels are way low. Vitamin D is one of the key components to dictating how the immune system is going to respond, whether it's going to become hyperactive or if it's going to respond appropriately. And if we don't have enough vitamin D, the immune system is going to dysregulate. So we think of vitamin D as a vitamin. It's really a hormone, and it really dictates how the cascade of inflammatory chemicals are going to go. Omega-3 fatty acids, I don't have enough time to jump into that, but that's one of those key things. I recommend sinus washes for most people with allergies. Get that pollen out of there each day. So that you're not just continually reacting to the same pollen all night and all day. Sinus washes have proven to be just as effective as most medication for allergy issues. One of the things I like to use in the office, and I use it with myself and my kids, is what's called quercetin or D-Histex. So D-Histex has a few extra things in there for allergies specifically, but quercetin is really one of the main ingredients. It's one of the big things I recommend for patients that, if you've had COVID, it's really great for lung healing as well. So it's one of those things that I think we've been using a lot of. And then we want to identify and remove our bucket fillers, right? So, if you're sensitive to something and you keep eating it, it's going to make you more primed to overreact the next time you're exposed to something that you're sensitive to, whether that be a ragweed or, tree pollen or grass pollen or whatever. If there's things that we can avoid, like I said, if you're sensitive to gluten, for instance, and you're still eating gluten, you're filling that bucket up. And so there's less capacity for your body to deal with the next allergen that comes along, like ragweed. So do what you can do. We still need to breathe when we go outside. So, if we're going to get exposed to it, what things can we control? And a lot of times it's easier to control the foods we put in our body than the air we breathe in our nose, right? And if you're curious, we can do some of the testing to figure out what you might be sensitive to, so that you can start to lower what's filling up that bucket. And then, in the extreme cases when things have really kind of gone haywire, we have more intense programs to really try to modulate that immune system, get it back into balance, get it into check. So that's my 13 things right there, guys. That's the power punch, I guess, if you will. Now, there's probably something that you guys maybe don't know, and that is that the research is showing how the relationship between the nervous system and the immune system is so highly integrated to normal function and health. Like I said, this area is, it was kind of cutting edge, if you will, 15 years ago. But most of us haven't been in a classroom, and even the kids in the classroom are being taught from people that didn't learn this 15 years ago. So, we're still about 50 years away from some of this becoming, more common knowledge. But some of the most compelling data involves the hypothalamus pituitary axis, or the HPA axis. And it's one of the key things when we talk about stress. And we talk about the hypothalamus and its response to stress, which triggers the anterior pituitary, which then goes to the adrenal cortex, which of the adrenal glands, which causes us to release cortisol and many other chemicals, right? Well, this HPA axis plays a critical role in regulating and modulating our body's immune response. You kind of think of it like our national intelligence agencies working hand in hand with the armed forces. And disruption to this system it critically upsets the immune regulation. It dysregulates the body's ability to control and balance our immune system. Like, we don't want to be immune suppressed, right? Because then if we catch a virus or a bacteria, it can wreak havoc on our body and can be deadly. but we don't want a heightened immune response either. We want a well-regulated immune response. And most of that takes place through this HPA axis, which is primarily spinally driven, right? And so if the spine is interfered with, we are going to have a lot of potential interference with this HPA axis. It's chronic toxin that our body is exposed to when we have in chiropractic, what we call subluxation. It's a joint misalignment. It's a soft tissue damage. It's inflammation, nerve interference. It's muscle spasm and pain and loss of inhibition and joint fixation. I wish I could dive more into each one of these words, but basically it creates a chronic stressor on the body, which is bad in the first place, but then it also disrupts this HPA axis, which ultimately disrupts our immune system. So does an adjustment have an effect on the immune system? I absolutely know that it does and believe that it does. Does it have a direct effect? Not necessarily, but it does help the body, like I said, develop that $5 word we talked about earlier, which is homeostasis. So if we're misaligned, we're good chance that our immune system is not going to be as well regulated. And studies have shown that stress and sleep cycles and tissue damage can all upset this delicate balance, this HPA balance. And it can hypersensitize or prime the immune system and hypersensitize us and make us more prone to an overreaction, as in allergies and asthma and bronchitis and other atopic disorders. So remember that almost all conditions result from a dysregulation of a system, either too much or too little. Basically, if we summarized every disease state in the human body, it comes down to either deficiency or toxicity, too much or too little. And it's all about trying to find that middle ground, right? That Goldilocks principle, not too hot, not too cold. That is homeostasis, and that is health, right? So when we have dysfunction in the nervous system and irritation, like I said, it can manifest in many ways. And one of the ways that it manifests is in these allergies or asthma. And, I've been in practice long enough and I've heard enough stories of patients like, my asthma wasn't as bad this year. I can't remember the last time I used my inhaler. And I've been using it for 30 years. Or, usually I break out really bad in the spring and fall. And this year I didn't. Why is, and they just kind of make note of it. And in the back of my head, I'm, because your body is more regulated this year. Your nervous system is working at a higher level this year. Your body's in better balance than it's been in years previously because you're under care. Now, not that that's going to fix everything, and it's not the cure-all, but what it does, it is an important part to, like I said, getting that body in balance. So one of the things that a lot of patients kind of ask is, what are some of the allergy points, from a chiropractic standpoint? If you come in with allergies, some of the areas I'm going to be checking real close, C2, C6, T8, T10. We know from actually a medical journal that these are the areas of subluxation or irritation in the nervous system that tend to correspond with allergies. Asthma has fairly similar points, maybe a couple of other parasympathetic, sympathetic driven points, C2, T1 through T4, S2, 3. That tend to show up. Eczema, kind of same thing. So we know where we need to be looking when patients present with these things. Now, I'm looking for these things whether you have allergies or not, to be honest with you. But sometimes, it's an area to cue in on, right? So what are the causes of these subluxation? What interferes with the nervous system? Well, really, we can break them down into macro and micro traumas, or more specifically, stress. And stress in three areas: bad thoughts, bad foods or toxins, and traumas. Micro traumas or macro traumas like car accidents and slips and falls and sports, those are easy to identify. It's the micro traumas that are far more common, though. We don't see a ton of acute injuries from car accidents and things like that. What we mostly see in the office is poor posture, poor sleep position, repetitive activities like looking down at your phone. We face an incredible amount of unnatural stress. We sit too much. We spend too much time in front of a screen, especially with tablets. I did a whole series on how detrimental that is. And these are some of the chief causes of what I see in the office and the patterns of subluxations that I see in the office every single day. It's, when we're sitting in front of a computer, for instance, that upper back, that T2 through T4 area, that's so common to have that area misaligned or subluxated. And these constant looking down at the phone just makes these problems worse. It also messes with our breathing and our diaphragm, and just, like I said, just dysregulates the body. We live in a very unnatural, unhealthy world. And not only are we, like I said, under more stress, it's more of this unnatural stress. We're under stress while sitting. We're not up moving. We're not, trying to find our food. We're trying to stay away from it. We're trying to find healthy choices of food nowadays, right? It's just so unnatural. So, one of the things I hope you take away tonight is that our body is designed to be healthy. It's hardwired to return us to health if we make the right steps. Our body is super intelligent, and it can restore the function of the immune system if you address some of the underlying causes. Now, some of it we can't go back and undo, but we can start to take steps to move it in a more regulated direction to where we're not having to turn to medication quite as often, and hopefully at all, because the body is in a healthier state. Not because I care whether, I don't really care whether, I hope pharmaceutical companies make billions of dollars. That's great. But what I want is your body to be so healthy that you're not having to reach for those things, right? So that my goal isn't to put the pharmaceutical companies out of business. My goal is that you're so healthy, like I said, that you're not needing those. There's a time and place for everything. Sometimes we do need those medications, right? So I'm not saying don't take them. I'm just saying if you're reaching for those frequently, there may be something underlying the surface that maybe we can start addressing to start getting to the core of the problem, not just waiting till the symptoms pop up. But here's the deal with the symptoms. In order to be an effective treatment, you really have to get to it before the symptoms have started, right? So starting to eat an apple after you have, severe allergy symptoms is helpful. However, eating the apple to keep your body from getting the allergens is even more healthy, or more, my good English is going to come through right here. It's more better, right? So at the beginning of class, I said that there are 3 reasons as we start to land this plane that we're in a health crisis. The first one is personal responsibility. Again, I'm talking to the choir. This is not you guys, but it's a lot of the people that aren't watching this, unfortunately, are the ones that need to hear this message, that we can change our health. And we can change it through, relatively simple things. The other big idea tonight is that we have this poor definition of health, right? What we define as sickness is maybe a healthy response. And a lot of times when our body is trying to tell us to change something, we don't want to listen to it. And we just want to cover it up, and we try to suppress our body talking to us rather than fixing the underlying issue, right? And the third reason that I believe that we're in a health crisis is this one. The one I didn't want to do earlier, but now I have to, because I've almost run out of time. And that is procrastination. The more we ignore, put up with, or simply cover up the problem, the bigger the problem grows. And the sooner you take action, and the sooner you start to move in the right direction, the more we can improve the outcome, right? Like I said, we can't change the past, and many of the reasons that so many people have allergies and asthma, etc. The truth is the underlying reason that they have those, we can't do anything about it at this point. But the more diligent we are about moving forward with better health, the more regulated our immune system can become, and the better our future will be. I love hearing, like I said, stories of patients that, have chronic bronchitis every single year, and then all of a sudden they're like, it wasn't too bad this year for whatever reason. Whereas the patient right before them is complaining that just started care is complaining that their, bronchitis was terrible again this year, So those are some of the fun things. Now, like I said, it is an adjustment, necessarily bronchial asthma treatment? No, not necessarily, but it is a body treatment, right? And at the beginning of the class, I said that there's a big difference between treating a condition or treating a symptom and treating the health of a person. And that's, like I said, that's kind of what we do. And I hope that that idea starts to resonate with you guys. So I made it through most all of my slides. I want to thank you guys for your time. I hope you guys got something out of it. You got a little bit of insight into, maybe a different paradigm a little bit. Because here's the deal, we're into March now, and one of the things I learned early in practice, and this is the real reason that I do these classes, to be honest with you, is that I learned that I could modify somebody's behavior for a few weeks, especially if they had pain. Pain is a good motivator, and when they're under pain, they'll modify their behavior in order to try to get out of pain. But once the symptom is gone, they quit doing some of the things that got them there, right? However, I also learned that if I could change their belief system about what they thought about their body, what they think about health, how they think about these symptoms and these conditions, if I could change that, then I could change their behavior. And those behavior modifications, they're not just temporary. It's not like a diet with a start date and an end date. They become a lifestyle. They become part of who they are, not what they do, right? And there is such a big difference. And so that's the reason I do these classes, is so that you guys hopefully take a little bit of that information and you start to apply it. You start to change some of the underlying core beliefs that maybe you believe that maybe weren't correct, and you start to change the future for yourself, but also your kids, and your kids' kids, and future generations. So anyway, that's the real reason I do these classes. So I hope you got something out of it. Thank you for your time. Good luck. God bless. Let us know if there's ever anything we can do to help. We always, I'm always willing to do a consultation and kind of see, is there some options that are available to you that might be good options for you guys. So once again, thank you guys. Have a lovely evening. And until next time, stay healthy and stay well.